What drove the most notorious dictator in modern history to send expeditions thousands of miles from his war-torn empire, desperately searching for ancient Egyptian artifacts while his nation crumbled around him? In the shadows of World War II, as Allied bombs rained down on German cities and his armies retreated on multiple fronts, Adolf Hitler continued to pour precious resources into a quest that seemed to defy all military logic. Deep within secret SS facilities, Nazi scholars worked feverishly to unlock what they believed were the ultimate weapons of the pharaohs. The desert sands of Egypt held secrets that Hitler was convinced could change the course of human history itself. Ancient temples whispered promises of power beyond imagination, and mystical artifacts beckoned from tombs that had remained sealed for millennia. This was not merely the obsession of a madman, but a calculated pursuit rooted in a twisted interpretation of history, mythology, and racial ideology that would consume the Third Reich until its final days. The story begins not with armies or battlefields, but with dusty libraries and arcane texts that spoke of a lost golden age. Hitler's fascination with ancient Egypt emerged from his belief in a superior Aryan race that he claimed had once ruled over advanced civilizations across the globe. In his distorted worldview, the magnificent monuments of Egypt were not built by Africans, but by blonde-haired, blue-eyed ancestors who had supposedly migrated from the mythical Atlantis and established colonies throughout the ancient world. This bizarre theory became the foundation for one of history's most expensive and secretive archaeological programs. The Ahnenerbe, Hitler's personal research organization, dispatched teams of scientists, archaeologists, and SS officers to scour the Egyptian desert for proof of Aryan supremacy. They searched for artifacts that would validate Nazi racial theories and, more importantly, unlock ancient technologies that could turn the tide of war. The Egyptian connection ran deeper than mere propaganda. Hitler genuinely believed that somewhere beneath the shifting sands lay the key to ultimate power. Ancient texts spoke of divine pharaohs who commanded forces beyond mortal comprehension, and Nazi occultists interpreted these stories as historical fact rather than mythology. The Ark of the Covenant, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and mysterious crystals that could supposedly channel cosmic energy became the holy grail of the Third Reich. But to understand how a failed Austrian artist became convinced that ancient Egyptian secrets could make him master of the world, we must journey back to the land of the pharaohs and uncover the extraordinary discoveries that would eventually capture the imagination of history's most dangerous regime. The year was 1798 when Napoleon Bonaparte's cannons first thundered across the Egyptian desert, marking the beginning of Europe's modern fascination with the land of the pharaohs. As French soldiers marched beneath the shadow of the Great Pyramid, they carried with them not only muskets and artillery, but also scholars, artists, and archaeologists who would unlock secrets that had slumbered for 2,000 years. The young general who would later crown himself emperor gazed upon the Sphinx and declared to his troops that 40 centuries of history looked down upon them. Napoleon's Egyptian campaign ended in military failure, but it sparked an archaeological revolution that would echo through the centuries. When his scholars returned to Europe with their sketches, measurements, and stolen artifacts, they ignited what historians would call Egyptomania. European salons buzzed with tales of golden treasures, mysterious hieroglyphs, and tombs filled with mummies that seemed to bridge the gap between life and death itself. The real breakthrough came in 1822, when a brilliant French linguist named Jean-François Champollion finally cracked the code of the Rosetta Stone. For the first time in nearly 2 millennia, the written language of the pharaohs could be read by modern scholars. Ancient texts that had been dismissed as mere decorations suddenly revealed their secrets, telling stories of god-kings who wielded powers that seemed to transcend the natural world. Temples' walls came alive with accounts of pharaohs who could control the flooding of the Nile, communicate with cosmic forces, and preserve their bodies for eternal life. As the 19th century progressed, European archaeologists descended upon Egypt like treasure hunters in a golden rush. Heinrich Schliemann, the German businessman who discovered Troy, turned his attention to the Nile Valley. British explorers like Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon began systematic excavations that would culminate in the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. Each new find seemed to confirm that ancient Egypt possessed knowledge and technologies that modern science could barely comprehend. The young Adolf Hitler absorbed these discoveries through popular magazines, sensationalized newspaper accounts, and the writings of pseudo-scholars who mixed archaeology with mythology. In the coffeehouses of Vienna, where Hitler spent his failed artist years, conversations often turned to the latest Egyptian discoveries and their implications for human history. The future dictator became particularly fascinated by accounts of the pharaohs' supposed racial characteristics, seizing upon any description that suggested European features. Hitler's twisted interpretation of Egyptian history was heavily influenced by the writings of Houston Stewart Chamberlain and other racial theorists who claimed that all great civilizations had been founded by members of the Aryan race. In their distorted worldview, the magnificent achievements of ancient Egypt could not possibly have been created by indigenous Africans. Instead, they argued, a superior race of blonde-haired, blue-eyed colonizers had migrated from the mythical continent of Atlantis and established advanced civilizations throughout the ancient world. These theories gained credibility through the work of archaeologists like Gustav Cassina, who used selective evidence to argue for Aryan migrations across Europe and beyond. When combined with the growing body of Egyptian archaeological discoveries, these ideas created a potent cocktail of racism, mysticism, and pseudoscience that would later become central to Nazi ideology. The stage was set for tragedy when Heinrich Himmler, Hitler's loyal lieutenant and architect of the Holocaust, became equally obsessed with proving Aryan supremacy through archaeological evidence. In 1935, Himmler established the Ahnenerbe, officially known as the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society. This organization, funded directly by the SS, was tasked with finding scientific proof of Nazi racial theories and uncovering the lost technologies of the ancient Aryan civilizations. Under Himmler's direction, the Ahnenerbe recruited scholars, archaeologists, and adventurers who shared the Nazi vision of Aryan superiority. These men were given unlimited budgets, military support, and access to conquered territories across Europe and North Africa. Their mission was clear: find archaeological evidence that would prove the racial superiority of the German people and discover ancient technologies that could be weaponized for the Third Reich. Egypt became the crown jewel of Ahnenerbe research, a land where Nazi scholars believed they could find the ultimate proof of Aryan supremacy. The pyramids, they argued, were not built by enslaved Africans, but by advanced Aryan engineers who possessed knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and physics that wouldn't be rediscovered by modern science for millennia. The hieroglyphic texts, when properly interpreted through the lens of Nazi ideology, would reveal the secrets of the master race and their lost technologies. But the most tantalizing prize of all was not carved in stone or hidden in tombs. According to Nazi occultists, ancient Egypt had been home to artifacts of unimaginable power, relics that could grant their possessors dominion over life and death itself. The Ark of the Covenant, they believed, had been hidden somewhere in the Egyptian desert after the Exodus. Mystical crystals described in Hermetic texts could supposedly channel cosmic energy and bend reality to the will of their users. Most importantly, the lost wisdom of Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge, was said to be preserved in emerald tablets that contained the secrets of alchemy, magic, and immortality. As World War II began and German forces swept across Europe, Hitler's obsession with Egyptian artifacts intensified rather than diminished. While his generals pleaded for more tanks, aircraft, and soldiers, the Führer continued to divert precious resources toward archaeological expeditions that promised to unlock the ultimate weapons of the ancient world. But what Ahnenerbe expected was that these expeditions would uncover evidence of something far more sinister than anyone had dared to envision, revelations that would challenge everything historians thought they knew about the relationship between ancient civilizations and the darkest chapter in human history. The first major Ahnenerbe expedition to Egypt departed from Germany in 1938, just months before the outbreak of World War II. Led by SS Oberfuhrer Ernst Schaefer, a seasoned explorer who had previously mounted expeditions to Tibet, the team included archaeologists, photographers, anthropologists, and SS officers specially trained in occult research. Their official mission was to study ancient Egyptian burial practices, but their true objective was far more ambitious: to locate and retrieve artifacts that Nazi occultists believed could channel supernatural powers. Schaefer's team established their base camp near the Valley of the Kings, where they began systematic excavations in tombs that had been overlooked by earlier archaeologists. Working under the cover of legitimate scientific research, the Nazi expedition used state-of-the-art equipment including ground-penetrating radar, photographic analysis, and chemical dating techniques that were decades ahead of their time. What they discovered in those first months would fundamentally alter the trajectory of Hitler's war effort. In a previously unknown chamber beneath the tomb of Ramesses II, the expedition uncovered a cache of artifacts that defied conventional archaeological classification. Golden scarabs inscribed with hieroglyphs that appeared to describe advanced technological processes, crystal formations that seemed to generate their own electromagnetic fields, and most remarkably, a series of bronze tablets covered in symbols that bore striking similarities to ancient Germanic runes. The team's anthropologist, Dr. Hans Rienerth, became convinced that these artifacts proved direct contact between ancient Egyptian priests and early Germanic tribes. Hitler received the first reports from the expedition while reviewing battle plans for the invasion of Poland. According to witnesses present at the meeting, the Führer abandoned all discussion of military strategy and spent the entire night poring over photographs and preliminary translations of the discovered tablets. By morning, he had made a decision that would have profound consequences for the war. A significant portion of Germany's archaeological budget would be diverted to expand the Egyptian operation, even as the Wehrmacht prepared for continental warfare. The timing could not have been worse from a military perspective, but Hitler's obsession had reached a fever pitch. He ordered the creation of a special SS unit, designated Action Ahnenerbe Egypten, with the sole purpose of securing Egyptian artifacts before Allied forces could reach North Africa. The unit was equipped with military transport aircraft, armed guards, and a direct communication link to Hitler's personal headquarters. Their mission was to systematically loot Egyptian museums, excavate promising archaeological sites, and transport everything of potential value back to specially constructed storage facilities in the German heartland. As German forces swept across Europe, Egyptian artifacts began flowing into Nazi-controlled territory at an unprecedented rate. The Egyptian Museum in Cairo was secretly plundered during the brief period when German forces threatened the city. Artifacts from collections in occupied France, Belgium, and the Netherlands were systematically catalogued and shipped to Germany. Most significantly, the Nazis established contact with Italian archaeologists working in Egypt, arranging for a steady stream of newly discovered items to be diverted to German research facilities. The crown jewel of these acquisitions was a collection of papyrus scrolls discovered in 1940 near the ancient city of Heliopolis. These documents, which Nazi scholars designated the Heliopolis Archive, contained what appeared to be detailed instructions for constructing devices that could manipulate electromagnetic fields, harness solar energy, and preserve organic matter indefinitely. Dr. Wilhelm Wust, the Ahnenerbe's chief linguist, worked around the clock to translate the scrolls, convinced that they contained the technological blueprints for ancient Egyptian civilization. Hitler's personal involvement in the translation process revealed the depth of his obsession. The Führer regularly summoned Wust to private meetings where they would spend hours discussing individual hieroglyphs and their possible interpretations. Hitler became particularly fascinated by passages that seemed to describe a collaboration between Egyptian priests and visitors from the north, whom he interpreted as ancient Aryan colonizers. In his mind, these texts validated his belief that advanced civilizations were always the product of Aryan genius, even when they appeared to flourish in non-European lands. The military consequences of this obsession became increasingly apparent as the war progressed. Resources that could have been used to produce additional aircraft, tanks, or ammunition were instead allocated to archaeological expeditions and artifact analysis. Skilled scientists and engineers were reassigned from weapons development programs to work on projects attempting to reverse engineer ancient Egyptian technologies. Most critically, transport aircraft desperately needed for military operations were diverted to ferry artifacts from North Africa to German storage facilities. By 1941, the Ahnenerbe had established 3 major research facilities dedicated exclusively to Egyptian artifacts. The primary installation, located in a converted castle near Munich, housed over 10,000 items ranging from simple pottery shards to elaborate golden sarcophagi. Teams of scholars worked in shifts around the clock, attempting to decode hieroglyphic texts, analyze the chemical composition of ancient materials, and test the electromagnetic properties of various crystals and metals found in Egyptian tombs. The most secretive facility, hidden deep in the Bavarian forest, focused exclusively on what Nazi researchers called functional artifacts, items that appear to serve technological rather than merely ceremonial purposes. Here, engineers attempted to reconstruct ancient Egyptian devices based on hieroglyphic descriptions and surviving physical components. Their efforts produced a series of increasingly bizarre contraptions. Crystal arrays designed to focus cosmic energy, electromagnetic coils based on ancient temple layouts, and chemical processes derived from mummification techniques. The psychological impact on Hitler himself was profound and disturbing. Close associates noted that the Führer's behavior became increasingly erratic as he spent more time studying Egyptian artifacts and translations. He began incorporating Egyptian symbols into personal belongings, insisted on redesigning Nazi insignia to include pharaonic elements, and spoke frequently about his belief that he was the reincarnation of an ancient Aryan pharaoh destined to restore the master race to its rightful position of global dominance. Heinrich Himmler, observing his leader's growing obsession, made a calculated decision that would prove fateful. In 1942, he authorized the creation of the most ambitious archaeological expedition in human history, Operation Isis. This massive undertaking would involve over 200 researchers, soldiers, and support personnel in a comprehensive effort to excavate every significant archaeological site in Egypt. The operation's ultimate goal was to locate what Himmler believed to be the greatest prize of all, the lost tomb of Akhenaten, the pharaoh who had briefly converted Egypt to monotheism and whom Nazi occultists identified as the first Aryan ruler of the ancient world. However, What was about to unfold in the Egyptian desert would surpass all expectations and reveal secrets that had remained hidden since the dawn of civilization itself. Discoveries that would ultimately expose the true nature of Hitler's obsession and its connection to forces far more ancient and malevolent than anyone had ever imagined. Operation ISIS began in earnest during the winter of 1942, just as German forces under Erwin Rommel were retreating across North Africa before the advancing British Eighth Army. While the Afrika Korps fought desperately to maintain their positions, Himmler's archaeological teams worked frantically to complete their excavations before Allied forces could secure the region. What they discovered in those final months would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The breakthrough came in February 1943, when Nazi excavators working near the ancient city of Amarna uncovered what appeared to be an intact underground complex dating to the reign of Akhenaten. Unlike typical Egyptian tombs, this facility had been designed as a working laboratory, complete with chambers for chemical experiments, astronomical observations, and what could only be described as advanced technological research. The walls were covered with hieroglyphic texts that seemed to describe scientific processes rather than religious rituals, and the chambers contained apparatus that defied conventional understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities. Dr. Ernst Herzfeld, the expedition's lead archaeologist, sent a series of increasingly frantic reports back to Berlin describing discoveries that challenged fundamental assumptions about ancient technology. In one chamber, his team found what appeared to be an electromagnetic generator constructed from copper coils, iron cores, and crystalline components arranged according to mathematical principles that wouldn't be formally discovered by modern science until the 20th century. In another, they uncovered chemical processing equipment that seemed designed for refining radioactive materials, complete with lead-lined storage containers and symbols warning of invisible dangers. The most disturbing discovery was a series of human remains that showed signs of systematic experimentation. Unlike typical mummies, these bodies had been preserved using techniques that maintained cellular integrity at a microscopic level. More troubling still, many of the remains showed evidence of surgical procedures that appeared to involve the implantation of metallic devices into the brain and nervous system. Hieroglyphic records found alongside these specimens described them as volunteers who had undergone procedures designed to enhance their mental capabilities and extend their lifespans indefinitely. Hitler received word of these discoveries while planning the defense of Stalingrad, but he immediately abandoned all military concerns to focus on the implications of the Amarna findings. He ordered that every available transport aircraft be diverted to evacuate the most significant artifacts before Allied forces could reach the site. Over the protests of his generals, who desperately needed those aircraft for military operations, Hitler personally supervised the airlift of over 300 crates of Egyptian artifacts to special storage facilities in Germany. The Führer's behavior during this period alarmed even his closest associates. Albert Speer, Hitler's chief architect and armaments minister, later testified that the Führer spent entire nights studying photographs and transcriptions from Amarna, muttering about ancient technologies that could still turn the tide of the war. Hitler became convinced that the Egyptian discoveries proved his theories about Aryan superiority, interpreting the advanced technology as evidence that his racial ancestors had once possessed capabilities that modern science was only beginning to rediscover. But the most significant revelation came from the translation of a series of papyrus scrolls found in the deepest chamber of the Amarna complex. These documents, which Nazi scholars designated the Akhenaten Archive, appear to describe a systematic program of human enhancement conducted by ancient Egyptian priests working in collaboration with what the texts called visitors from the distant stars. The scrolls detailed procedures for extending human life, enhancing physical and mental capabilities, and creating what they termed perfected beings, who could serve as intermediaries between the human and divine realms. Dr. Wilhelm Wust, working under intense pressure from Hitler himself, produced translations that seemed to support Nazi racial ideology while revealing technological possibilities that captured the Führer's imagination completely. The texts described a golden age when advanced beings had walked among humans, sharing knowledge that had been gradually lost over the millennia. Most significantly, they contained what appeared to be detailed instructions for recreating the enhancement procedures, complete with chemical formulas, surgical techniques, and technological specifications. The implications were staggering, and Hitler became utterly consumed by the possibility of using ancient Egyptian knowledge to create a new breed of enhanced humans. In his twisted mind, these discoveries validated everything he had believed about racial superiority and provided a roadmap for achieving the ultimate goals of the Nazi regime. He ordered the immediate establishment of a new research program, designated Action Lebensborn Ägypten, which would attempt to recreate the enhancement procedures described in the Akhenaten Archive. Working in secret laboratories hidden deep within German territory, Nazi scientists began experimenting with techniques derived from ancient Egyptian texts. They attempted to synthesize the chemical compounds described in the papyrus scrolls, constructed electromagnetic devices based on hieroglyphic diagrams, and even conducted preliminary surgical experiments using procedures outlined in the ancient documents. The results were invariably catastrophic, producing nothing but suffering and death, but Hitler refused to abandon the program even as his empire crumbled around him. The final chapter of Nazi Egypt obsession played out in the closing months of World War II, as Allied forces advanced toward Berlin and Hitler retreated to his underground bunker. Even then, surrounded by the wreckage of his thousand-year Reich, the Führer continued to believe that ancient Egyptian secrets could somehow save him. He ordered that the most precious artifacts from the Egyptian expeditions be brought to the bunker, where he spent his final days studying hieroglyphic texts and attempting to unlock what he believed were the ultimate secrets of the pharaohs. According to surviving witnesses, Hitler's last coherent act before his suicide was to destroy the most significant documents from the Akhenaten archive, ensuring that their secrets would die with him. In his final moments, the man who had brought such devastation to the world was still convinced that he had been on the verge of a breakthrough that would have vindicated all his actions and secured his place as the greatest leader in human history. The Nazi archaeological expeditions to Egypt represent one of the most bizarre chapters in the history of World War II, revealing how dangerous pseudoscience and racial ideology could corrupt legitimate scientific research. The resources squandered on these futile quests for ancient superweapons could have prolonged the war significantly if they had been devoted to conventional military production. Instead, Hitler's obsession with Egyptian artifacts became yet another factor in the Nazi regime's ultimate self-destruction. And thus, this extraordinary journey through time reveals not only the depths of one man's delusions, but also the timeless human tendency to seek supernatural solutions to earthly problems, a weakness that can transform even the most advanced civilizations into instruments of their own destruction. The story of Hitler's obsession with ancient Egyptian artifacts serves as a chilling reminder of how dangerous ideas can corrupt even legitimate scientific inquiry. What began as genuine archaeological fascination during the Napoleonic era eventually became twisted into a weapon of racial ideology that helped justify one of history's greatest crimes against humanity. The Nazi pursuit of Egyptian secrets reveals the dark side of humanity's eternal quest to understand our ancient past and unlock its mysteries. The resources squandered on these expeditions tell their own tragic story. While German soldiers froze in the snows of Stalingrad without adequate winter clothing, Hitler diverted precious transport aircraft to evacuate ancient artifacts from Egyptian tombs. While Allied bombers destroyed German factories and cities, brilliant scientists and engineers were reassigned from weapons development to decipher hieroglyphic texts that promised supernatural powers. The opportunity cost of this obsession was measured not just in military defeats, but in the countless lives that might have been saved if Germany's scientific resources had been devoted to medicine, agriculture, or peaceful technological advancement instead of chasing ancient fantasies. Perhaps most disturbing is how the Nazi interpretation of Egyptian archaeology demonstrates the malleability of historical evidence when viewed through the lens of prejudice and ideology. The same monuments and artifacts that inspired wonder and respect in legitimate scholars became tools of racial hatred in the hands of Nazi propagandists. The magnificent achievements of ancient Egyptian civilization, created by indigenous African peoples over millennia, were systematically misrepresented as the work of mythical Aryan colonizers. This historical revisionism not only insulted the memory of the ancient Egyptians but also provided pseudo-scientific justification for contemporary atrocities. The ultimate irony of Hitler's Egyptian obsession lies in its complete failure to achieve any of its stated objectives. Despite spending enormous sums and deploying hundreds of researchers across multiple expeditions, the Nazi archaeological program produced no technological breakthroughs, no supernatural weapons, and certainly no evidence of Aryan racial superiority. The ancient Egyptian artifacts that Hitler believed would secure his thousand-year Reich instead became silent witnesses to his regime's collapse and moral bankruptcy. Modern archaeological research has revealed the true magnificence of ancient Egyptian civilization, achieved through the ingenuity, creativity, and hard work of the Nile Valley's indigenous inhabitants. The mathematical precision of the pyramids, the sophisticated medical knowledge preserved in ancient papyri, and the complex administrative systems that govern pharaonic Egypt represent genuine human achievements that deserve our admiration and study. These accomplishments stand as testament to the universal capacity for greatness that exists within all human cultures, rather than the exclusive privilege of any single race or nation. The legacy of Nazi archaeological crimes extends far beyond World War II, influencing how we approach the study of ancient civilizations today. Modern archaeology has developed strict ethical standards and international protocols designed to prevent the politicization of archaeological research and protect cultural heritage from exploitation by extremist ideologies. The painful lessons learned from the Nazi abuse of Egyptian archaeology have helped establish the principle that ancient civilizations belong to all humanity, not to any single nation or race seeking to claim them for political purposes. Stories like these demonstrate that the past remains vibrantly alive in our present world, shaping our understanding of human potential and warning us against the dangers of allowing scientific inquiry to be corrupted by hatred and prejudice.